Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Look at this. Barb is 64. She was diagnosed at 44. That's 20 years since she was diagnosed. She also has, one of her sons has type 1. Interesting. He was diagnosed when he was 10. Sorry, I just read this to you. I don't know if you realize it or not. She's a twin. Look at that. It's interesting. Celiac and hypothyroidism in the family, other autoimmune stuff runs rampant, it says, through her family history. Well, I guess we're going to find out all about it now, aren't we? Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. Of course, if you have type 1 or your child has type 1, and you're a U.S. resident, completing the survey at t1dexchange.org/juicebox would be greatly appreciated. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. US Med is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and we've been getting our diabetes supplies from US Med for years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or the number, get your free benefits check, and get started today with US Med. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, and later in this episode, we're going to be speaking with Heather, who will talk about the importance of education and understanding the impacts of hyperglycemia. MedtronicDiabetes.com/hyper.
Hi, my name is Barb.
Barb, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Good morning.
Good morning. And you're an audio engineer, is that correct? You're
Not quite.
Not quite.
Remember, fake it till you make it.
Well,
tech person here.
Yeah, you're doing well now. Where you sound terrific. So, let's see what we want to know. How old are you? How old were you when you were diagnosed? All that stuff.
I'm 64 years old. I was 44 when I was diagnosed, so 20 years. You have to tell me if you want the story because that will take a while in and of itself. I have 2 boys. One is type 1. I'm one of 12 kids. Large extended family.
Wow. How many kids do you have?
I have 2. They're now 27 and 25. And the 27-year-old was diagnosed with type 1 when he was 10.
When he was 10. Are there other autoimmune issues in your family? Did your husband have anything or on his side or?
Well, Scott, my whole story is around the fact that I'm one of 12 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a twin, right in the middle of the pack. It's kind of fun and games when I go to the doctor and they ask, tell us your family history. And I say, how many days do you have? Lots of autoimmune issues within my family. I'm the only sibling with type 1, but we have a niece with celiacs. We have several hypothyroidisms. We have Sjogren's. We have, what else? An aunt with lupus. So it's been kind of somewhat rampant.
And Barb, you're Irish Catholic?
Close. German Catholic.
German. Okay. All right.
You know, when I was small, Scott, and my older brothers and sisters' friends would make that comment, Catholic, right? I had no idea what they were talking about. And now I do.
Yeah. You didn't know that they thought your parents were building an army for the Lord?
Exactly.
I don't even know if it's that sinister. I think the Catholic Church is just like, make more babies. We need people donating. So
yeah, that's another podcast, Scott. T1D and the Catholic Church. So my mother was type 1.
Okay.
She was diagnosed at exactly the same age I was.
44.
Well, we think 44. she was one of 9 children. And on her side of the family, there are at least 14 known type 1 diagnoses.
Jeez, really?
Really.
And she said to herself, you know what I should do? I should make 12 babies.
Scott, I don't.
They didn't see it that way, did they?
No, I don't. I don't know that she knew because, that's part of one of my messages to the world today is talk within your families about your type 1 diagnosis. I was figured out that I was 12 when my mom was diagnosed. I don't remember her diagnosis. I put a call out to my living siblings to say, who remembers mom's diagnosis? Nobody. Nobody remembers how it happened. We think she was pregnant or soon to be pregnant with her last child at 44. And she spent, the rest of her life taking 1 dose of insulin a day, testing with urine strips the entire time. She died in 1998.
At what age?
She died at age 69, pancreatic cancer.
Okay.
So
unless you can get type 1 diabetes from an intercourse injury, I don't know how to guess what happened to your mom, but that seems most likely to me. Jesus Christ. That lady was probably having sex or cooking. You know what I mean?
Exactly. A lot of cooking.
Jesus.
A lot of cooking.
Oh my God, there's so many kids. Yeah, but that's really, so it's a great message, honestly, because even modern day, the times I say I'll say, is it in your family? And they'll go, no, my cousin has it. I'm like, is that not in your family? Like, what are we talking about? Like, that's in your family. But people still don't think about it that way all the time. It's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wasn't diagnosed till after she passed. So I never, ever had a conversation with her about it. Yeah, unfortunately, right?
But that's part of how she did it, right? Like, she went to a doctor and somebody said to her, this is what happens. You take this shot now. And she's like, just show me how to do it because I got to get back to making, I'm busy. And so and it was never even spoken about. So you went back to your siblings. By the way, you said living siblings. How many of them aren't?
A brother and a sister have passed away. My brother passed away first of undiagnosed source of kidney disease at the age of, what was Jim, 62, 63? And my younger sister passed away in 21 of stomach cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a pretty picture genetically in our family, but so there's 10. There's only 10 left.
You guys can only play basketball against each other now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I do want to hear a little more about that remembrance you have of realizing, like, we grew up with mom who had diabetes and it was never spoken about.
All I remember, and my childhood memories are fairly scant as it is, but all I remember is we lived on a small dairy farm out small dairy farm.
Mm-hmm.
And she would go out into a little anteway, back door area to take her shot every day. I mean, when I think about what she did and didn't do, and she had a wringer washer. So she would, on laundry days, and I learned this because I now have her medical notes, but only as far back, it wasn't to diagnosis, but since 79, I think I have. But on her notes, it will say, took 31 units of Humalog. First it was NPH, then Humalog, but only 29 on laundry days. Fascinating, right?
She figured that out. Yeah. I get lower on laundry days, so I'll take less insulin.
Yeah. Long periods of time between when she would see the doctor, between pregnancies, of course, and she was done being pregnant when she had the diabetes. But, I read some notes, it was 3 years since she had been into the doctor. So, she was self-managing and living unbelievably. I remember a couple episodes of low blood sugar. It was never a thing, nothing to get too excited about. Go take mom some juice, or it was when I think back, I'd give anything to just have a conversation with her and to empathize. Boy, that must have really sucked.
Yeah. she's in another level of alone because all those people around you, but you're not sharing it with them. The medical community is not real valuable at that point about it. This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. Learn more about hyperglycemia at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper.
Well, hi, I'm Heather Lackey. I am a wife and mom. I have 2 children that are seniors in high school, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 34 years. And I'm a dietitian and a diabetes educator. You know, I'm the director of global medical education. I lead a team of clinicians that are developing content.
How do you feel when your blood sugar's high?
Irritable, thirsty, hungry.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
See education working, see people thriving. That's kind of the fuel that feeds, my fire.
What would you like to see community members talk about more?
Hyperglycemia is the critical thing, right? That leads to short-term and long-term complications. Hyperglycemia is the greatest unmet need in the treatment of diabetes currently. And I think that that's where technology can help.
If you're having trouble with hyperglycemia and would like to talk to other people in the diabetes community, check out the Medtronic Champions hashtag or go to medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper. If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information. That's a lot to take on by yourself. But I mean, honestly, it sounds like she was more than capable of doing that because, I mean, Jesus, like she was doing everything except, I mean, I don't know. I was going to say milking the cows, but she might've been doing that too, right?
She did some milking of the cows.
Okay.
She baled hay. She worked at a supper club on the weekends. We call her small but mighty. She was a force.
She worked at a supper club on the weekends, like cooking or serving or something?
Server. Loved it.
Yeah.
Well, we think she loved it because it, got her out of the house.
Yeah, Barb, she loved it because your dad wasn't there with his pants off. That's why.
Yeah, well, there's that.
She was like, I need a break. I'd rather bring strangers food. Get this guy. All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so, but part of the challenge of kind of weaving together family history is the long span between the oldest and the youngest. And the fact that, my oldest sister you'll love this, was a nun for a while, ended up leaving before she took her final vows. But so she was out for a couple years of high school at a nunnery, and the older siblings, as they left, everybody left home after high school.
Mm-hmm.
There was no hanging around.
There was no space, I would imagine.
Somebody needed that bed.
Yeah.
So we all have different memories of what home was like and what, to be honest, we all grew up very independent. We were all into kind of our own self-care and kind of still are. I mean, we're kind of, so. It's
a function of having that many kids, right? You just can't. You can't take care of all of them. You can't make sure every one of them's doing, exactly well. It's almost like, look, you're alive and you're competent. You got to get out of here. I need the space. I need the time. I have 2 kids and I feel overwhelmed by making sure they're okay. So I get that. I really do. It makes sense. Did it feel like you were ignored, or is that just how it was?
It was a matter of reality. I think that, I always joke with friends that we don't have a Hallmark card family. I'd look at Father's Day cards. Well, no, he didn't really teach me to ride a bike, or, I didn't have that kind of personal relationship with my parents. Was it bad? I don't,
It's just
you
what
could
it
look
was.
at it. It was what it was. We were, we grew up to be very independent. We're amazed that we all turned out fairly okay. All went to, pretty much have all been to some type of post-secondary. Myself on down, everybody went to college. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. Advanced degrees, the whole 9 yards. So they did something right.
No. Yeah, I'm not. It's funny. I hope that it doesn't sound like this. I'm not saying anything's wrong with it. I'm interested in the human part of it beyond that. Like, obviously, they did the things they were supposed to do and beyond. If you guys all went to school and, et cetera, took, know how to take care of yourselves. But I'm saying, like, on a personal human, like, little girl inside of you level, was it lonely? Or was there no ability to be lonely because of the people? But there's a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
It was lonely.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because you don't have contact and time with your parents, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So which one of your, like, when I say to you, oh, they cared more about, there's a name that pops in your head, right?
Well, here's the deal. I was a twin right in the middle of the 12. There were 6 boys and 6 girls. Dad's joke was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And so the twins got a lot of attention, right? Because we were an anomaly, kind of unusual. They'd take us places, right? Because we were the twins. I think at different times, we all had some shining moments. I see these great photos. The 3 oldest were girls, my 3 oldest sisters. Mom sewed clothes for all of them and their dolls, and they just look adorable. Mm-hmm. And then 2 boys showed up, and, again.
Not as much fun with the clothes.
Yeah. And then 2 more of us showed up. So I don't think of any one of us as really, but being twins, I think just because we were different, right? Mm-hmm. Like we got to hold the Merry Christmas and the family photo at the front of the gang, which I'm sure you're going to want to see.
But you were you guys were famous for being twins in the family, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think we got a little more attention because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing we did.
It was a better story than that's number 7.
Yeah. Well, and you'll love this because when you say number 7 at my dad's funeral, we all wore numbers.
I bet. Yeah.
Simply because, again, many of us had moved out of town. And so people knew which one we were.
Do you have closer relationships with siblings that are closer age to you, and then the people on the ends feel like they're not as related?
There is some of that. What I found personally is because I got married older and had kids as an older parent, mm-hmm. I have somewhat more in common with some of my younger siblings who have kids closer to the age of my kids.
Sure.
Particularly as a stay-at-home dad, you kind of gel with those who have kids the same age as yours. So there's some of that. And so it's changed through the years.
Yeah.
But there always seemed to be somebody, if you needed something, mm-hmm. you could go down the line and decide who you wanted to talk to that day. So,
Barb, my wife and I just had this experience the other day. We were out. What were we doing? I think we were buying like hanging plants for outside. I don't know how you guys order your diabetes supplies like CGMs, pumps, and testing equipment, but at our house, we use US Med. And I'm going to walk you through the entire process right now. I'm looking at the email from US Med. It says, it's time to refill your prescription. Dear Arden, please click the button below to place your next order. Then you click the button. That was it. 2 days later, I got this email. Thank you for your order from US Med. We wanted to let you know that your order, and it gives you an order number, was shipped via UPS ground. You can track your package at any time using the link below. And then there was a link, and then it showed up at our house. Now I'm going to walk you through the entire chain of events. On the 29th, which was a Saturday, I clicked on the email. On that Monday, the 1st, I got an email that said the order had been sent. 4 days later, on the 5th, the package arrived. If you can do it easier than that, you go get it. But if you can't, usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get started today with US Med. Get your diabetes supplies the same way we do. And we bumped into this woman who we remember because her kid played baseball with Cole as children, not in like college or something, but as children. And we had a nice conversation about selling our houses and moving out of town and all the stuff that you talk about when you're in your 50s, right? My wife and I remarked to each other when we walked away, like how valuable that was because she's ahead of us and she could kind of tell some stories about what she was thinking at the time. And then we realized like she's 8 years older than we are. But we only know her because our kids are the same age. Yeah. That's the exact same point you were just making. Like, I have nothing in common with this woman. She's lovely, and I spent a lot of time staring at her, like, on a grassy field. But, like, I wouldn't have known her if she didn't have a child the age of my son. That's a thing that happens to us a lot because we were younger when we got pregnant the first time. It's very interesting. So, okay. So you've got your mom's got it. We don't know about it, really. It's an interesting story about how she lived with it, but it's not like you're not functionally understanding what's happening to her or anything like that. Give me the time frame there. Like, what year was it when she was diagnosed? Do you know?
She was diagnosed in 1972.
Wow. At age...
She died in 1998.
82, 92. She made it like 25 or so years with diabetes, maybe 27.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Did she do that management style one shot a day her whole life? Did she ever come around to something else?
Never.
I'll be damned.
To my knowledge, she did end up in a nursing home toward the end of her life. So I don't know if they managed her differently then, but all the doctor's notes I have are that she was on this, one shot of, she went from animal insulin to the Humulin. There's one, this made me chuckle. And I should have read these notes. I read them a long time ago when I was first diagnosed, and I just pulled them out again. One of the notes say that she's recorded as saying that 3 of her grandparents, no, it says all 4 of her grandparents had diabetes.
Of some kind. They just called it diabetes, though.
Right. Yeah. But, who would have known that? I just learned in the last few years that all of my grandparents or 3 of the 4 have Christmas birthdays. Again, family lore that
you'd think somebody would have said.
You think somebody would have shared.
They were too busy. They were milking. Yeah. Your dad was milking something at 20 hours a day. And then I love that you're old enough that we can joke about this. And then
oh yeah, I'm way old, Scott. So
So oh my God, that's fascinating. You have 3 grandparents that were born on Christmas Day. It's not a thing you knew.
That's correct. Never talked about. I
think everybody who feels like they're ignored by their family modern day should listen to this and be like, oh my God, they don't even know this girl.
That's right. Yeah. And our second son was due on Christmas, and I found this out and I thought, oh, he's destined, right? But I willed him out on the 22nd. So
your family has sex once a year? That's not possible for your parents. They had to be doing it at least a couple times.
Yeah. And there was a crib in their room, Scott.
Wait a minute. What's the 9 months on that? What's 9 months before Christmas? Is it
Mother's Day? It's December, January, February. So I guess it's Valentine's.
So colder when we can't be outside as much.
And farming, that Iowa stuff.
You don't have as much light. So, I see.
I do that too.
Oh, I see what's going on. No. Yeah. No, I see what's going on. Like Mother's Day, Valentine. Hey, Mother, what would you like for Mother's Day? How about 9 months of carrying a baby? Jesus. I'd prefer a locket.
Yeah. In more ways than one, right?
Yeah, no kidding. You're hilarious. It's fantastic.
A locket.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so let's maybe fast forward a little bit here. So, you were diagnosed before your son?
That's correct.
Okay. What do you remember about your diagnosis?
Oh, I've told the story quite a few times. So my kids were 8 and 6 years old. I was at home at the time. I had just started a new work gig. I woke up one day, literally, I woke up one day and I couldn't see across the room. Mm-hmm. It affected my eyes first. So I took myself to my optometrist and he examined me and he said, oh, this is kind of rare, but I've seen this before and you have an infection in your eyes. And of course, my first thought is, I said, my mother was a type 1 diabetic. Is it diabetes? It's not diabetes.
Not diabetes. You have a rare infection.
Okay. So, and at the same, I'm 5'7", about 120 pounds at the time. And this is going to be a refrain. Okay.
Mhm.
So you don't have diabetes. So he gives me some drops, doesn't do a thing. My eyesight is getting worse. He sends me to an ophthalmologist in town who says that I do indeed have this eye infection. I said, Doc, my mom had type 1, about the same age. You're not diabetic, which made me feel good, right?
Yeah. I just have a horrible eye infection.
I didn't want to be diabetic.
Right, of course.
So my eyesight continues to get worse to the point I had just started this job where I was doing some travel. I will never forget, I had a huge bottle of water that I took in the car with me. I had gotten contacts, I had laser surgery back in 2000, hadn't worn contacts for years, was in contacts for my distance vision, and I had reading glasses. So, and at the time we were looking at maps and stuff in the car. I'm like juggling eyeglasses and water, and I was a mess. So this goes on, and he's about ready to prescribe some pretty serious eye drops. Like there could be some kind of big side effects.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, in the meantime, I have this raging sore throat. I haul myself to my internist and I said, you're going to do two things. You're going to test me for strep and you're going to test my blood sugar. Guess what she said? You're not diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
So, they do it. I had a raging throat infection and my A1C was 14.
Jesus.
And the nurse calls and she said, I'm surprised you're standing up. And I said, I'm surprised too. And of course, guess what the next thing was? Well, it must be type 2, right?
Yeah.
I'm 5'7", 100. Now I'm down. I was down. Oh, that was the other thing. I had all the classic symptoms. I had lost so much weight. I could barely find clothes to fit me. I was wearing like size 2s. And I was not a size 2, but I was a mess. So they first dealt with me as type 2, metformin, didn't do a thing. She kept saying, you can't be type 1. I said, I could be. So I took myself to an endocrinologist at a bigger city close by and indeed was found to have type 1. And so, my family all sent me D gifts.
You got a bunch of gifts? What'd you get?
I got a bunch of gifts, but and to be honest, it was hard. I didn't want to have diabetes, but on the other hand, my vision came back, and I started putting on weight. But it was hilarious. They were sending me to nutrition classes, and I was the only type 1 in the room with all these type 2 folks, and it was crazy stuff. So anyway, and then 2 years later. My boys and I have a different story. They said that I tested them regularly. I think they asked me to test them. They'd see mom pricking herself and say,
"Is that how you remember
it?" That's how I remember it. We'll get Matt on the next call. His blood glucose was like 253. My first thought was it's not diabetes. My first thought was, oh, So the story gets better. So I take him to the pediatrician. He's not diabetic. It must be hormones. He's now 10 years old. 10. Must be hormones. I said, I don't think so. So once again, he had gone to a swim camp at a college nearby. And in the meantime, I took him to my endocrinologist who happened to be he could do pediatrics. So they did the glucose tolerance. In the meantime, he went to the swim camp and he remembers getting this call from us saying that he had type 1. And his only memory is the coach at the swim camp came over and said, buddy, I have diabetes and the sugar-free pudding is really good. In the meantime, he's doing okay because he's active and he's swimming and he's early, right? We've caught it early. We go down to a children's hospital. That's another story, because they wanted us to be admitted to the hospital with him. Well, there's no room in the hospital. We're sitting in the lobby, which was helpful in lots of ways because we saw lots of children in much more despair than my son. My son felt pretty normal at the time. So that was a good lesson for him to look around and say, hey, I can do this. And eventually they came down, saw my logs, saw that, I kind of knew what I was doing, and pretty much sent me home. And so ever since then, we've really kind of been the self-managing type 1s.
How does that work for you, Barb? What are your outcomes like day to day?
Outcomes are pretty good. I still tell him to do as I say and not as I do, because I tend to be less disciplined about myself and more about the parenting end of it. But our outcomes are, we think we're doing fine. I tend to be in the 6s. He tends to be in the mid lower 6s. So we're both on Dexcom and Omnipod. He now lives in England, which is very interesting. That's another story.
Jolly good.
Yeah, jolly good.
No, I'm sorry.
So it's been, but to be honest, Scott, he and I have had these stories. Our experiences with endocrinologists have just been not unlike anything you haven't heard. I've heard this on many of your podcasts. All I want them to say when I go in is, how can we help you? How can we help you? Because I've been managing every day for the last 365 days. How can we, or the last, whatever it is, every 6 months, how can we help you? Instead, they're looking at charts and numbers and come back with what they think of as the answer. And I'm like, you didn't ask me. Like,
anything.
What's going on? You didn't ask me anything. So Matt and I used to joke that we would be like telling them things. And I've been able to do that even more now that I've, become the social media maven that I am with the Juicebox and other. I tell you, the things I have learned being online is heads and shoulders over anything I've ever gotten in a doctor's office.
Yeah.
We looked at the sugar surfing stuff. We took their book. They started handing that book out to other patients. I said, there are other things too. They were just grabbing hold of things. The misinformation we've been given, it's just been kind of, I'm still in awe isn't the right word because that has a positive connotation. But I'm just so disappointed that the medical community hasn't embraced those who live with type 1 diabetes in a way that would be educational and best practices with the right outcomes, right? And I know all this. They're worried about liability and they're worried about, but I would often find things out through the years and I'd be like, well, why didn't I know that then? Why didn't somebody tell me that? And things have changed, right? We were early adapters of Dexcom and had it with the big needle and the syringe. And
I'm fascinated, Barb, that you don't really need to tell people that much for them to be able to figure it out. Like, I think where the medical community can go wrong sometimes is thinking that they have to give you an absolute map, step by step. It has to be verifiable and correct, and it'll work every time the way we wrote it down here for every person that's ever lived. You really just need to tell people things like, hey, you know what? This is how insulin works. You should try adapting that to your life. Here's how food impacts your insulin. Here's how insulin impacts your food. Here's 10 tools that'll, you'll probably use over and over again. Pre-bolusing, for example. They're not big ideas. I feel like it's a thing. I hate to say a toolbox because it sounds trite. You're giving them a toolbox full of tools and you're saying, look, everything you need to live is in this toolbox. I can't tell you exactly when to use them, but I think if I told you what all these tools do, you could have an experience and think, oh, I should have used this screwdriver today. Like that would have worked here. And then eventually, a couple of months into it, you reach for the screwdriver when you need it. You don't wonder what I should have been doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But don't you, I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and I thought, don't you get nervous when you see comments on the Facebook page and hear things in a podcast where people are totally Like someone was asking where to find the transmitter, like where on their body was it? And I thought, how do people manage when there isn't even a base level of here are the facts. Like here
You call 9 out of 10 medical supply companies, they don't even know what they're sending you.
Right.
And they do it all day long with a few things. And you'll say, hey, I need, like back with G6, you'll be like, I need sensors. And then a transmitter shows. They go, oh, no, you can only have 2 of them a year or something like that. And you'd be like, wait, no, I use one every 10 days. No, it says here. I'm like, no, you're looking at the transmitter. Oh, yeah, you're right. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if no one knows, then they can't tell somebody. And then you get home and all you have to go on is, this doesn't seem like it's going right. But then they take that from you sometimes by telling you, oh, no, you're doing great. You're doing great. So you go home and you have all these experiences that in your gut feel like, I don't think this is what should be happening to me. But then the doctor says, no, you're doing terrific. Don't worry about it. And A1C, that's great. And then you go, oh, I'm doing great. And then when you're 64, you're in a home. You know what I mean? Right. And then it's too late. Right. And then no one left to blame. So, my gosh. I by the way, I don't want to go backwards, but your mom was in a home in her 60s?
Well, she had pancreatic cancer. That was mostly what put her there, yes.
Barb, my point was going to be, how amazing is it over the last 2 generations of what 60 years old looks like?
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Tell me about it. Because I mirror her diabetic diagnosis, I'm hoping that I won't mirror her pancreatic cancer diagnosis, right, at 68. So I've looked very closely at the differences in our lifestyle, and there's really no markers yet for pancreatic cancer that we are aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So, my internist and I have a plan that at around 66, 67, I'm going to have some acute pain that they're going to have to do a whole series of imaging tests for, just to try to get ahead of anything that might show up.
Is there a way to look before a pain comes?
That's what I mean. We're going to make up the pain.
Oh, I see. I hurt. Run a scan. That's a good idea. Look at you, Barb.
Yeah.
I just, this is going to sound self-serving, but it really isn't. It's apropos of the conversation. I was in a retail situation the other day, and there's this girl working there, and she's having a conversation with me and someone else that's there about how people think she looks really young all the time. And she's in college. And I looked at her, I was like, well, you really do look like you're in high school. And she's like, oh, I know. And I said, well, it's not. And she talked about how it's not very fun for people to think you're younger than you are. And I said, well, that's now. When you get older, you're going to think it's terrific. And she kind of got what I was saying, but not so much. And I said, I'll give you an example. I said, how old do I look? And I said, be very honest. We'll never see each other again. Who cares? Right. And she's like, you could see her struggling. She wanted to say one thing, but she was going to say younger. I was like, don't say younger just because you think, like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I said, and she goes, you're in your late 30s. And I was like, early 50s. And she was
nice.
Like, wait, what? And then you could see like genuine, like, she wasn't being nice anymore. She was like, what the hell are you talking about? And I said, that's what I'm talking about. Like, when you're older, it'll be great if you look younger. But at 52, I think back on my father. He looked 52. And that's not just from my perspective. I can see pictures of him. If I showed you a picture of my dad at my age, you'd think he was 20 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really something. So I don't have a lot of, like, I know the cancer thing is worrisome, but as far as the diabetes stuff goes, you're not in the same world as your mom was,
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
and your son's going to do better even.
Absolutely. Yeah. He already does, so.
Mm-hmm. And he already does, because he's got a different perspective on it than you do even. You're probably tainted a little bit by your mom's perspective, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And
along those lines, Scott, I'd like to say that, and I've said this to other parents, I have never, ever been concerned about my well-being as a diabetic. Never.
Meaning, like well-being, health.
Okay.
Safety?
So, you see a lot of stories of parents kind of just so much living in fear for their kids. And I think I've often shared that because I'm in control, right? And I've never been a teenager or young adult, but, my husband traveled a lot. I never, ever felt afraid to be alone.
Have you ever had a scary low?
I've had 2 scary lows, and they were both precipitated by alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Nice.
didn't eat. So I know what that feels like. But I'll also share when my son went to college, and I was always afraid for him because I didn't have control over him, right? That self-efficacy. But when he went to college, he went about 6-7 hours away. He didn't wear a Dexcom at the time. He was on a speech and debate team and competed nationally and didn't want one more thing to think about with buzzers and beeps and alerts and vibrations. So, be it as it may. And I said, how do you want this parent-child thing to go? And he said, Mom, you're 6 hours away. I need to create my own village here of people.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that and he used that village a couple times. He was sick. But boy, they brought him, they took the reins. Not every kid is lucky to have that kind of group, but it made so much sense to me that, if I got it, even if I was on a follow app, the only thing I could do was call 911, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that people do that, but I often say, knowledge is power, knowledge is power, knowledge is power. And the more we can equip ourselves and those we love with knowledge, that goes back to sharing information and being informed and talking to people and sharing the fact that you're diabetic with those closest to you. It just makes so much sense to me because it gives me a sense of control.
Yeah. No, I understand. I also think there's to some degree some luck involved that you haven't had a situation that sticks to you. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I also
Totally.
think the way you grew up, like, even if it happened, you'd be like, well, I was expecting to die, so that's okay. Like, I mean, you grew up in another time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, your parents, by virtue of what they did for a living and where they lived, you almost had an experience growing up that was a generation behind your actual generation, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
Right.
you have like a 1940s attitude about life.
There you go.
You do, right?
We did have an outhouse until we were born in 1960.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, things don't seem as bad when you're not in the snow. You know what I mean?
So the other thing I wanted to talk about is this study going on at the University of Chicago. Do you remember that? The Precision T1D? Does that ring a bell at all?
I mean, I remember it from your notes that you put here that you wanted to talk about it.
So is it good? Can I talk about that?
Oh my God. Yeah. Wait. Do you think that I stop people from talking? Do you think I'm over here going, nope, move on. We'll edit that out later.
No, but you might have a plan of some kind.
Oh my God. What would that look like? It's funny. I got this note from somebody the other day that was really touching about how she was in the waiting room at the endo's office, and another person in the waiting room overheard her get bad advice from the medical staff. And so this woman followed her outside, stopped her, and said, hey, listen, what they just told you is not even close to being right. So if you would be willing to give me your cell phone number, I'm going to text you something that I think would help you. And she texted her the Bold Beginnings series from the podcast.
Yeah, I just read this.
You saw this post. Okay, great.
Yes.
So, then I put that up because, I mean, honestly, like, I wanted to thank all the healthcare workers out there who do grab people in hallways and whisper Juicebox Podcast into their ear, which happens a lot. And you think, well, Scott, how do you know about that? It's because the Facebook group asks you when you're coming in, the private group asks you when you're coming in how you heard about this. That group collects 150 new people about every 3 days. And on the intake forms, someone pulled me aside in a doctor's office and told me about it. Comes up 5 to 10 times every 3 days. And so I wanted to put a thank you out into the world to those people who are spreading, good information, whispering in people's ears and everything. And the responses that came back in that post from other people talking about how they found the podcast, I found myself thinking, and you have to understand, I have to think about the podcast from a lot of different perspectives. And one of them is from a marketing perspective. And I see people out in the world trying to pimp their diabetes coaching stuff. And they're like, look, I got a review. Look how good Bill did on my plan that cost him $3,000 because I charge him $600 a month and it took him a year to get it right. And and they use it as a review. And I think, I wonder how infrequently they get those reviews because I only see the posts every couple months. If I were to put up a social media post with a positive response from a listener, I could probably do it every 4 hours. And that's not about me. It's about how well the podcast seems to work for a lot of people. And then the only thing that makes me think is I'm not getting it into enough people's hands. Like if it works that well for such a large percentage of people who intersect it, how come I'm not finding a way to help more people? Like that, it makes me feel badly. I know that sounds weird, but like good feedback makes me feel bad, but only on one level, on like that kind of marketing level. On a personal level, or my pride about what the podcast does, etc. So on, that all makes me feel amazing. I didn't expect that much feedback in that post. And as I read through it, some of it made me cry. Like I actually read something from this one guy named Ricky, I think, and he was talking about the advice they got from doctors and how his kid's life was going very poorly. And then one day, because they timed some stuff badly at a birthday event, his kid had to like skip having a piece of cake with everybody because he was afraid he was going to stack the insulin. And that led him to look for other advice. And now he's talked about how well his daughter was doing. And that made me cry. Like I was like, oh my God, I think I saved that kid's life. And I try not to think about it like that very often, but every once in a while, I let myself live in it for a second, because the truth is I do the same thing day in and day out. Like last night was Sunday. My family, my wife and my daughter went out around 1:00, and they're like, do you want to come? And I'm like, I'm going to work. And then I got done at midnight last night. And I was working on something that may or may not turn into content for this podcast. I don't even know yet, but sometimes I need motivation. Like, you know what I mean? So I use your success to fuel my desire, if that makes sense, to keep going. I don't know why I shared that.
Well, no, I totally get it. And I have to tell you, so, I had 2 letters to the editor published in the New York Times. Those are my, little stars on my wall. And they were around COVID. I think my first one was about 6 Feet of Kindness. It's a great little read. But anyway, I had read something a couple of years ago that was dissing social media and how awful it is. And so they didn't print it, unfortunately, but I had written a letter to the editor saying, hold on. Here is what social media has meant to me and my son with type 1 diabetes, is that we can connect with a worldwide community who have the same condition that we do, who have tried multiple things, that we learn from each other. I mentioned the Juicebox Podcast, and I thought, this is, to me, it is what I always bring up when, particularly around parent groups, dissing social media and, all the crap that's out there and the metaverse. And I said, I'm telling you, my life would not be nearly as fulfilling without and particularly around type 1, the community that I have found on social media. So kudos to you. I followed you when you were Arden's Day. So,
Oh, you were just reading the blog.
That's how I first came into it, was Arden's Day. And so when this Juicebox stuff exploded, I'm sending it to my son and all this stuff. If anything, it's kind of overwhelming to me now, the plethora of podcasts. I feel like there's not enough hours in the day. And so, you pick and choose and listen to what's useful. But I truly think that, talk about a toolbox, Scott. You have the Juicebox toolbox. I can't even say that quickly. Juicebox toolbox.
I started to make more content at first because I had too many advertisers. And I was like, oh, everybody wants to advertise on the show, but I only have this one episode every week. And I was like, I struggled with it. I was like, I asked my wife, I wrung my hands for 6 months. Would people be okay with 2? What if I put 2 up a week? Would that be too much? Would they upset? And then as 2 was okay, and then people during COVID were like, you could put up more, and I'm like, okay, here's 3, here, take 3 stories and a management on Thursday. I was like, you know what am I doing? I'm like, do you know I have right now, I'm sitting on 70 episodes that are done and ready for you right now. And that's constant for me. I constantly have a backlog of about 70 completed episodes. And I get done interviewing. I'm going to have this experience with you 20 minutes from now. We're going to get done. And I'm going to think, I should just put Barb's out tomorrow. Like that can't sit and wait. Like, what a great story about blah, 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 right? But then I realized, oh no, you know what? You thought that last week 5 times when you recorded 5 times. Keep going in order. It's not, I'm grateful that there's ads on every episode. That's nice. And it's great. And I appreciate you all helping me send my kid to college and stuff like that. Like, that's all fantastic. But that internal feeling I have that this information, people need this information. Like, it has to get out there so they can hear these stories, so more people can have these experiences. And I can't just have one thoughtful story with Barb in May. You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be more, because the person who was lucky enough to hear you, that when your episode came out, there'll be another person that comes along that needs your story, but it came out a year ago and they're not going to go find it probably. So I need more. Like, I realized it just needs to be a faucet and people can drink from it when they're thirsty. But the information needs to be flowing the whole time. And the information is episodes. And so it's a lot of work, but I think it's the best way to support people, because the truth is, Barb, if I was in charge, I would just get you all together and I go, look, listen to this series, then that series, then this series. And here's 100 stories from people with that have diabetes that will fill in all the gaps for you. Just go listen to those and you're done. Like, you don't need me anymore. There's no way to get people to do that. So instead, I just keep providing it and hoping that people trip into it and then get caught up in it, listen, and get what they need out of it, because they don't know they need it until after they have it.
Need it.
Yeah, not even till they need it. They don't know they need it when they need it. They didn't know they needed it till after they have it. And then they say, I wish I would have found this 3 years ago. I wish this would have been here when I was diagnosed. The woman who told me this morning that she found the podcast and listened to an episode and was like, oh, that's good, and got what she needed out of it, but then didn't go back to it. And then years later went back to it and then had that sinking feeling of, oh, I wasted years of my life. Like that kind of stuff. So I just create nonstop. Like, you and I are recording today. I'm not supposed to even record on Mondays, but I'm looking at next Monday, and for some reason I'm recording twice next Monday. It's a draw for me. And I feel very good about it. Like, I feel very good about putting the information out there and letting people tell their stories, finding new ways to tell the stories, finding new ways to pop the information out, because people's desire to hear things changes over time. Like, there's always going to be people who like podcasts, long form, but a 23-year-old's not going to listen to a story with a 64-year-old for an hour.
Right.
Likely. You know what I mean? And so, like, I'm designing like shorter form content for them. And like, I wish you could see this whiteboard here. If I was 10 people, I'd be putting out 4 episodes a day. I'd have so much content. But instead, I just think, well, I'll get as much of this done before I burn out, you know what I mean, as I can.
Have you ever thought about billboards on interstates?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Just with your, you talked about trying to reach more people, just with the website or
the way you're going to reach people in this space is word of mouth. It's the only way it works. And then that person who hears about it has to hear about it either enough or be in a situation where they're so desperate that they're going to try a podcast to learn about their diabetes. That's really the truth.
I mean, for personally, the Omnipod 5 podcast was invaluable. I mean, I had no training. And talk about insurance companies, they couldn't figure out why I needed insulin and the Omnipod. I mean, it's just ridiculous,
what
right?
Both of these for.
Like, here, we'll give you this, but we won't give you this that goes along with it. But that was the series that got me started. I mean, in my little,
But everything comes with a trade-off. So, or time commitment that you don't know about. Like that Omnipod 5 Pro Tip series, which is just 3 episodes, started 3 years before Omnipod 5 was available. I started talking to the person that I worked with at Omnipod, and I said, hey, when Omnipod 5 comes out, the biggest problem you'll have is if people don't know how to use it. Like, right, they're going to need to know how to set it up. They're going to need to know how to use it, because if they don't, you're going to slap it on them. My daughter uses an algorithm. I know that the algorithm, it's not magical. You know what I mean? Like settings have to be right. Yeah, you need to understand some things. If they don't understand that, they're going to put on Omnipod 5. Their blood sugar is going to jump around. It's not going to come back like Skynet is controlling it. And they're going to go, this thing doesn't work. And then they're going to go online and go, I tried Omnipod 5 and it doesn't work. I was like, so you're going to have to give people good information. Well, that's hard to get a company to do. Not just Omnipod, but it's not their job to, as crazy as it sounds, to train you on how to use the device. That's your doctor's job. And we know the doctor isn't going to know about the pump. And if they even know about it, we know they're not going to know how to set it up correctly, because if they did, they would have been able to help you with all your other stuff, which they couldn't help you with. So I have to have those conversations for years with my person about I think this is important. We should actually take time and put together a thoughtful couple of episodes that'll explain things. And then in the middle of that conversation, she just went to another company. She left. And then the next guy comes in. And then I got to start over again with, hey, I know you just started this job and you're probably overwhelmed and trying to learn your job and everything, but this is important. And I start over with him. And he's a type 1. I don't know if he'd be okay with me sharing that, but I just did. He's a type 1.
No, he did. He shared it himself.
No, you don't know who I'm talking about. My contact, not the person on the episode, right?
Okay.
And so he's like, no, I think you're 100% right. And then he put his team on developing those episodes along with me. And then we must have spent 6 or 8 months developing that content behind the scenes.
Wow.
And so the amount of time that went into it, when it all is said and done, I made about 4 cents an hour to make those episodes. Like, no kidding. It ended up being a labor of love. Like, there was the money just was not even, it's just ad money. It wasn't even like a lot. But I was like, this is really important. Now, here's the trade-off. No one from like Tandem's ever been on my podcast. They don't reach out to me. They don't touch me because I look like I'm connected to Omnipod. But I say to them, I'm like, Omnipod just buys ads on this podcast. Like, I don't have another business relationship with them. Like, you could come on and talk about your pump. I'd love that. But it doesn't happen. So then when you tell me the Omnipod 5 Pro Tip series was really valuable for you, I think, oh, that's great. But I'm letting down people who are using Control IQ.
Yeah.
You know?
Which is another great system.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not my fault. They won't come to me. Like, I say it on the podcast once because I know they listen, because they all, by the way, I know you're all listening. Most of the companies have someone tasked to listen to the podcast, actually. So it's someone's job to listen to my podcast, probably at every one of the diabetes manufacturers that exists. And so, like, they hear me saying it. I'm like, come on, like, I'll talk about your thing. Like, let's go. And then they just never do it. So, and I'm not picking on Tandem, like, but like, there's other companies too who are just, they're scared to reach out because they think that I'm like attached to Dexcom. Like, I'm like, I finally this year got another CGM company to advertise. And I'm like, well, maybe that will make them understand.
Oh, the Eversense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're really lucky. You know, I equate what you're doing with my decision. I was in higher ed administration. So I worked for one college at a time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I wanted to be a high school guidance counselor so that I could work with all the colleges all of the time.
Yeah.
and be more useful, right? To that young woman who's a junior in high school who's having a hard time. But no, my job was to sell the one college, right? But I think the position you're in is invaluable.
I hope. I'm trying to do the best with it I can. Like, every once in a while I'll get crap from somebody online. It's like, you take ads, and I'm like, well, I mean, I can't.
It's free.
I got to eat, right? And by the way, you don't pay for it. Like, rock and roll. Like, it's free. Listen to it or don't. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I actually hear people like, there were 2 ads on that episode. I'm like, like, I wish I could leave reviews for listeners sometimes. I'm like, it's not fair. You're allowed to leave a review for me. I'm not allowed to leave one for you. Like, shut up. It's free. Skip past it if you don't want to listen to it.
That is so funny.
Yeah, but
hey, can I ask about your closed loop system?
yeah, but we got to do the Chicago thing. Which do you want to do first?
Let me just ask a quick question.
Go ahead.
I've never gone that route. And part of it is
DIY you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever had folks, well, no, because you're using the Dash, right?
Arden uses Dash pods with IAPS right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And G7 Dexcom.
Okay. So there's no problems with warranty. You know, I get concerned about the regulations. And if I run into trouble, you know, I'm just sitting here by myself.
What's your concern? Like, say if you tried.
So something goes wrong.
Like
I guess
what?
I just go back.
Goes wrong how?
You know, that's a good question because obviously there's the online community to ask questions. But if something happened to me using that, there's nobody culpable except for me.
Right.
I guess that's it. Maybe I don't have enough confidence in myself.
Okay,
we can move on.
No. Let's dig into it for a half a second. What is your concern? That if something happens, there's no one to ask a question of? Or if you drop dead, you can't sue somebody? What is it you're worried about?
Yeah, maybe a part of the latter. You know,
when you're
just
dead,
in
you won't
terms of
care.
something comes on, goes wrong that, you know, but yeah. It's just my laziness more than anything to not look at.
Listen, I'm not here to sell anything to anybody. A do-it-yourself algorithm is literally code that you download off the internet and build yourself into an app that controls your insulin pump and speaks to your CGM. That's it. You might as well have built it yourself with popsicle sticks. It's yours. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And the Dash pods are different from the classic Omnipod pods. Is that right?
The Eros pods, the original ones. Yeah, I don't actually think they're going to be available much longer, if they even are anymore.
So that's not what you use. You use Dash pods.
Dash pods, yes.
Okay. I was going to give you my Eros pods. Okay.
And if your Dash pods, like let's say you're using a DIY system and you fill a pod up and 12 hours later it errors. For example, you don't get to call Omnipod up and tell them and have them send you another one. Yeah.
Right.
You're in a different game now if you're doing that.
Yeah. And maybe that's more of what I think about is, you know, just having ready. I'm such I always have backup supplies, partly because my son's on the same system. So I've always been backups. Oh, I forgot one thing, Scott, that I think is, again, the social media piece of this world is two situations where my son was in kind of an emergency situation, and once in England and once in Chicago. And both times it was because I reached out online, people stepped up, and it was solved.
I mean, crazy.
How often does that happen? He was in England, was on business in England. They were still testing for COVID. He unfortunately, it was at the end of the COVID thing. He tested positive before boarding his plane home. So he had to stay for 10 days in the airport hotel.
Oh, I see.
And he had not packed enough supplies.
Okay.
So he's in England, right? I'm like, well, you have insulin, right? Yes. Well, go get some syringes, put double mask or get some delivered to you. They would not, because he didn't have an NH card, he could not get syringes. So now I'm thinking, okay, eventually, you know, through reaching out online, we found someone.
Did you do that on my group? Where did you do that?
No, you know, Scott, I don't even remember to be able to give you credit. But
oh no, I don't mean that. I mean, like, I see it so frequently. It's fascinating how quickly somebody will step up and help somebody else.
I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Even at the base level of, you know, here are the pros. That's huge. I think that's huge. Anyway, I had to share that because, you know, as the mom.
Yeah, no, let me say this, though, because I didn't say this when you were talking about the benefits of social media. Social media, not different than anything else. It's just how it's wielded.
Right.
I take the opportunities I have by having people follow on certain places, like listening to the podcast or, coming into a Facebook group that's now I think today actually it just went over 50,000 members. Like, it's a responsibility, like, right? And then you can do what you want with it. Like, it's almost like a gun. I can go hunting with it, rob a bank with it. Mm-hmm. And so I've chosen to take this opportunity I have and try to do something good with it. And I know there's people who don't hunt who are like, well, weird analogy, but I've never hunted either. I'm just saying. It's all in what you do with it. Now, if I was a bad actor, I could look at those 50,000 people and be like, I wonder how many different ways I can get money out of these people. Right? Like, instead, I just go, look, here's the advertisers. If you can support them, that's great. If you don't have a need for it, like, right on. Like, I'm not asking you to like get a Dexcom to help me. I'm saying, if you're going to get a Dexcom, could you use my link? Right? Like, that's all I'm saying. And that helps support me and keep me going. Now, there's, times when you do something else, like we're actually considering doing a cruise for listeners right now.
I saw that.
Yeah, I think that might happen, actually. And you would think, oh, here it is. Now he's going to cash in. Well, I just had a meeting with the person who's running it. And it turns out that after this whole thing's over and I spend 5 or 6 days on a ship and 2 days flying in and out and everything, the likelihood that I will make 8 cents is very little. Like, hopefully the cruise will pay for itself. And I was like, all right, whatever. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's like, it's a thing people seem to want. And I think they would like it. And so I'll do it. But if you think when it's over, I'm going to be like Scrooge McDucking in a pile of gold, you got that wrong. Like I don't want you to think I'm not bad off. Like, I make more than a reasonable amount of money to do what I do. Like, but it's not like, there's not like millions of dollars falling out of every like pocket when I put my jacket on or something like that. But I do think people think that sometimes.
No, the people want to be around those, look at the adult, I'm sure you're familiar with the camping, camps for adults, right? I forget what it's called, but yeah.
Is that it? Yeah.
And, I even asked my endo, actually the first 3 endos I had here, could you give my name to all of your other adult type 1s to connect with me? Yeah, you don't have to give me their information, but can you give them mine? Because I really want to start a group and I don't know how to reach people. Mm-hmm. Can't do it.
No, it's HIPAA
They can't
violation.
do it. And they didn't want to do it themselves.
No one wants to be involved in anything.
We had a great school nurse when we moved to Ohio, and my son was in 8th grade, and she took it upon herself to put together a group of T1D families. It was fabulous. But she was a registered school nurse. Now they contract with all kinds of folks. But she made a huge difference to us when we made the move and were able, and we still have contact with many of those families. Yeah. I think people want to be around others who get it. It's like sending your kids to T1D camp, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's terrific. And somebody's got to make that overture and build the thing. And you have to realize, like, when you said you read the blog, like, I didn't have, like, I wrote that blog for free for years. Yeah. Like, I didn't have an ad, like, nobody gave me any money. I just thought it helped people. And I had some free time and I thought, well, this is good. I'll do this. Trust me, I know plenty of people. You said something nice about the podcast earlier and it stuck in my head. Like, I didn't say it out loud, but if I would have listened to people back when I started the podcast, it wouldn't even exist. Like, I had prominent people in the diabetes space say, you cannot tell people how you manage your daughter's diabetes. Like, they know how to live well, but they don't tell other people about it. Instead, they write you blog articles about how scary and sad it is. And we're all here together and I've got your back and like all that, like, not unreasonable stuff, but it's all like preying on your emotions. And meanwhile, that person's running around with a 5.4 A1C and could exactly tell you how to do it and won't open their mouth and say one word about it. And so, because they don't have the balls to talk about it out loud. And I get that. Like, I even understand not wanting to do it. But, you don't realize there's some people in this space that you think of as like Mary Poppins, and they're not Mary Poppins. It's just interesting. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't like me, and that's all well and good. All I can tell you is that I get up every day. I make this podcast all day long, and I see how many people it helps. And it's my goal to make it bigger. it's my goal to make it bigger because I think it'll help more people. There's no space for me. I can't get any more ads. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm capped out as far as I think how well I can do with this. Like, I think it is what it is now. And now it's about keeping it going and meeting more people and helping more people and spreading the word so that I can, shut this microphone off one day in the future and feel like I did as much as I could. So that's what I'm shooting for here.
Well, thank you.
No, please. You have to thank me. There's people paying me. You don't have to worry about it. It even makes me feel weird to hear you say thank you. And I don't know why, because I genuinely, I don't want you to or need you to. I don't want people to feel the way I felt when my daughter was diagnosed. That's
well, you're just a brother by another mother, Scott.
Yeah,
because, we're probably related.
You think so?
Well, given my extended family, probably.
Yeah, you're probably related to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm related to you and Genghis Khan, I think, Yeah. So,
exactly.
Oh my gosh. Is the thing in Chicago. Let's finish with that. So there's a study in Chicago?
I can't remember where I saw this. It was on, it may have been on your page, but someone mentioned this study. Never heard about it. See, I was a person who, when my son was diagnosed, I was really put off by the fact that there was no questioning about anything. And I thought, how in the heck are we ever going to figure out where this comes from if we don't ask those newly diagnosed any questions about history or environment? I just thought there could be somebody out there who could come up with something. Mm-hmm. So anyway, when I saw this study, it's called Precision Genetics for Type 1 Diabetes. They are looking to identify genetic mutations that drive T1D.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've heard of these mutations. They say T1D is a frequent feature in patients with mutations. And I don't know what these means. AIRE, FOXP3, and STAT1. Recent studies suggest that T1D patients with certain mutations may be able to have their disease reversed with targeted therapy. So there's studies trying to accelerate this precision medicine. And it reminds me of cancer treatments. You know how they're doing immunotherapy? I don't know if you know, but they're trying to do more targeted treatment based on the kind of cancer you have. It's what it reminds me of. So T1Ds apparently have certain mutations, and they're trying to identify that.
What's the name of the study?
It's called Precision Genetics for Type 1 Diabetes. The website is Precision T1D, all small letters, .uofchicago.edu.
Okay. Precision genetics is an emerging field that aims to tailor medical treatment to individual genetic profiles in the context of type 1 diabetes. Precision genetics focuses on, too much scrolling. It's going faster than I can read. On understanding the genetic factors that contribute to the onset, progression, and management of the disease. Here are some key points about precision genetics for type 1. This is from ChatGPT 4.0.
Yeah.
Predisposition, identifying markers, genetic, personalized risk assessment, tailored treatment plans, prevention strategies, research and therapeutic development, challenges and ethical considerations, etc. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something that's being researched, and they're trying to figure out if they can use this precision genetic technology to help people with type 1. So
exactly. And so, I'm always looking for things where this huge family of mine with this obvious genetic disposition to type 1 could be useful. So,
right.
So my son and I have done it. It's very easy to do. They send you, there's an interview, a very short interview where they answer questions and tell you about the study and blah, blah, blah. And they send you a sample kit to collect saliva. It's done through a saliva collection that you mail back, and that's it. There's nothing you do in person. I mean, I did go out to Boston are you familiar with the UMass program? Denise. I went out to Boston and tried to get into her study. That's an interesting study too. It's using a long-term, it was a drug that was used to treat TB. Does this ring any bells at all? So, it's Fossman Lab. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah. So she was on the podcast years ago. And listen, she's one of a lot of different people going after a specific idea. But at some point, I can't I'm glad people are out there doing research, but I can't have every person out there who's like, I wonder if this is a thing. I'm going to spend 25 years trying to figure it out. Like, if you figure something out, let me know. But like,
Right.
I can't
Oh,
talk to
no.
yeah,
and
yeah,
she's been
right.
going at it forever.
But
she's a great, really. But anyway, I don't know where this, obviously, I'm hoping that any work a research group like this comes up with could help in perhaps identifying more markers or, any foresight, I think, is valuable. Again, knowledge is power, right? So anyway, I don't know if people know about this, but I thought it would be worth sharing for anybody who wanted to get in on the fun.
Thank you. Listen, we started rough
good.
with your microphone and finished well with your story. So I think this was a good use of our time
still
today.
There?
Yeah, can you hear me? Testing. Hello?
Hello?
Barb?
Oh, I lost you.
Oh, it's that Ohio internet.
Apparently.
Yeah. Dave Chappelle's using all of it up, probably.
Yeah, they're putting fiber out in front of my house as we speak. So,
no kidding.
It very well could be Ohio.
I was going to say it's possible we're about to get cut off, but hold on one second for me. We're done, but let me say goodbye to you privately. Hold on one second. Prolonged hyperglycemia can lead to serious health problems and long-term complications. Learn more at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper. This episode of the podcast was sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. The conversation you just enjoyed was brought to you by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get started today and get your supplies from US Med. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. When you support the Juicebox Podcast by clicking on the advertisers' links, you are helping to keep the show free and plentiful. I am certainly not asking you to buy something that you don't want, but if you're going to buy something or use a device from one of the advertisers, getting your purchases set up through my links is incredibly helpful. So if you have the desire or the need, please consider using Juicebox Podcast links to make your purchases. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.